Hello, I'm Harold Lane, and welcome to a glimpse of paintings inspired by my experiences during World War II. I was a member of a top-secret Army unit, unknown to the general public until well after 1980.
In December 1941, the United States was plunged into World War II. Encouraged by the military success of the British over Rommel, through the implementation of tactics of deception, the American High Command became convinced of the need for a chameleon ghost army. The Army decided to enlist artists and architects for this special purpose, and the 603rd Camouflage Engineer Battalion was created. It was composed of students and graduates from well-known schools in New York, Philadelphia, Boston, and Chicago. Many were famous. Others became so. This unit was informally known as the Ghost Army.
My classmates at Parsons School of Design decided that we wanted to enlist. We felt very patriotic, and so we went down to the Grand Central Palace in New York City, and so we did. We enlisted in the United States Army, and specifically into the 603rd Camouflage Engineer Battalion, which was based in Fort Meade. However, this first painting does not show Fort Meade, but rather the induction center at Camp Upton in New York. And the feeling I tried to get across in this little temper painting was that everything was in a rush. You rushed and you waited. You rushed and you waited. You waited to eat. You waited to sleep. You waited to exercise. You waited to get shots. You waited for everything. And one of the things I think that impressed me was the water towers right near the barracks we were in. And now, in this particular painting, it's somewhat abstracted. The shapes are more important than depicting the reality. In fact, this is the only painting I ever made at Camp Upton. And we have to remember that it's the artist's option. He not only records, he innovates, he creates. And this is really not a very emotional painting, and it's a kind of an interesting one. Finally, after basic training at Camp Upton, we left for Fort Meade in Maryland. That is, those of us who were going to the 603rd left. And when we were down here, I had to get used to a lot of unusual things, at least unusual for a fellow like me, like showering, as we did. Here we're a little temper painting. It's called GIs in a Shower. It's kind of a community living, and never having lived in a dormitory in all my college years, I didn't know what it was like, a community shower. And I made this very small, a kind of interesting temper painting to give that feeling of, well, here we are, no more modesty, down the drain, you're in the Army now. Also at Fort Meade, I tried here to record the horror of KP, a somewhat surrealistic type of painting. This is a small watercolor. And I remember being told again and again, make sure that you keep the edibles separate and garbage from the non-edibles. I never could figure out why. Potato skins were edibles. Calves' eyeballs, they were non-edibles. And the bones were non-edibles. I remember that also, cleaning out the grease traps. I don't think that I've ever worked harder at one thing than KP. And I don't know of anybody who got more KP than I did. Now we go on maneuvers, the Tennessee maneuvers of 1943. And here I try to show in this small watercolor painting done on Tennessee maneuvers, men in vehicles. I remember our first sergeant always berating me for taking so much time up with my, as he called it, darned painting. But he should have remembered also that all of the privates and the PFCs in this outfit were commandeered from all over the United States art schools, architectural schools. We were a mass of artists and architects who came here in this camouflage, 603rd Camouflage Engineering Battalion, because we thought we were going to camouflage the United States. But we did go overseas, which we'll talk about in a few minutes. Here we are on Tennessee maneuvers, men in vehicles moving, the Red Army versus the Blue Army. Kind of an interesting setup. We try to outfox and outbattle each other. We buried trucks, and it takes a lot of digging to bury a 2.5-ton truck, but we did it. While we were on Tennessee maneuvers, I recall one night that proved rather interesting. And it was recorded in this little oil painting here called Pigs in My Pup Tent. It was a cold night, and if you understand anything about GIs, they have two shelter halves, and they have to get together, put the two shelter halves together, and make a tent, and so we did. And we got into our tent and pulled our blankets over. It was a cold night, and we went to sleep. All night long, we felt pushing and shoving, and each blaming the pushing and shoving on each other. Well, morning came, we looked around, and my God, we were sleeping with two pigs. And we hooted and hollered, the pigs ran out, pushed, and they created havoc, ripping the pup tent apart. However, the body warmth that these little fellows gave us and that we afforded them was really great. And here we have Pigs in My Pup Tent. We visited a quartermaster unit, I recall, and I made a painting based on that called Resting Soldier in Barracks. The soldier was a black GI, and it was an interesting experience for me because I didn't understand or realize that the black troops and the white troops were separated, segregated from each other. It's an on-the-spot watercolor painting which later, much later, won a first prize as an oil painting based upon this one, winning the first prize for the New Jersey Society of Painters and Sculptors, the George Elmer Brown Award. As I said before, I found it a little shocking in understanding that blacks were segregated into different units during World War II. This is from a fellow who was born and brought up in Harlem, and so I found it quite unusual at the time. A painting called Night Guard. In this particular painting, an oil based upon an earlier watercolor, I try to depict the loneliness of guard duty. 4 hours on, 2 hours off. The night seemed never to end. It was endless, it was tiring, and it was lonely. And on occasion, two guards would meet for a moment, speak, and wait to be relieved. Finally, we leave Tennessee for an embarkation point called Camp Kilmer in New Jersey. And we went out to sea, and in 14 long, wandering days, traveled on the high seas, finally landing in England. Based in England, in an area known as the Midlands, while we were there, we went to an airport, or an airfield, I guess you would call it, or we called it then, and we watched the soldiers sending up weather balloons. I never knew why, but I was entranced by the various colors of the balloons that they sent up. In fact, the painting we're looking at, again a small temper painting, is the only one I did in England. We did quite a bit of training there, and we also went to Stratford-on-Avon to see Shakespeare. We're in England for a short period of time, and finally we understand this is it, D-Day.